Coraline Jones always dreamed of finding a better world.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Art is Hard with Sage McGee. Today we're going to be doing a painting from the movie Coraline in a cubist style. Well, okay, more accurately, we are going to be doing a painting of a Dank meme, which is a screenshot from the movie Coraline. Alright, let's go. We are going to begin by unrolling our brush bag. Meh, that wasn't a very good unroll. Let's try that again. We are going to begin by unrolling our brush bag. That was a nice unroll. From it, I'm going to take my fine brush, my liner brush, a round watercolor brush, this littler watercolor brush, I don't know what that's called, 2 micron pens, one fine, one bold, and 2 pencils. 2 because one has no eraser and the other has no lead. So profound. Jiggle about your supplies, touch the paper towels, move your supplies somewhere else, sort of line them up, don't do it all the way. Take your supplies, make them go away, and then bring them back. Now we're going to take out our watercolors and our watercolor tray. Whoops, wrong way around. Watercolor tray. Go ahead and open up your there it is. There we go. Oops, there we go. Now we're ready to not use these supplies. So because I drew this very lightly, it is too light for the camera to see, so instead I will describe to you my inspirations. First is Femme au Miroir by Jean Metzinger, and I was inspired by this in the way of the very crisp lines and the use of triangles, very heavy use of triangles. Quite like the way that looks. The next inspiration was Portrait of Picasso by Juan Gris, and from this I quite like the way that he has a very sharp, crisp line and then a dark shadow that goes into a very smooth gradient outwards. Really like the way that looks. And then my last inspiration is La Sonate by Marcel Duchamp. I like the color palette of this as well as the general softness. I don't like how sort of aggressive looking that most cubist paintings are. Duchamp, by the way, is the artist behind the sculpture The Fountain, which is a urinal on a pedestal. There it is. Which he submitted to the Society of Independent Artists in New York, and they rejected it, and that made all the cubists and Dadaists very upset. Next we're going to load our brush full of color, just swirl it around, dip that into our tray, which I already have a bit of water inside of, give that a good mix, and just keep adding pigment until you're pleased with the opacity. I also added just a smidge of army green to make the color a little bit more muted. Go ahead and fill that in everywhere on Coraline's dad's computer. Even though I spent hours and hours painting, editing, and voiceovering this video, I could not be bothered to look up that character's name, so as far as I'm concerned, he's Coraline's dad. Might be named like Steve or Robert, something like that. Go ahead and continue with his keyboard. Be mindful of the edges. I say as if you're going to follow along. I mean, I certainly hope you do, but this is more for the technique lesson or to help you fall asleep. And that's okay too. If I help you fall asleep, I've made a good contribution to society. Now moving on. I'm going to add quite a bit more army green to the existing yellow. Now that that's all mixed together, this next technique requires 2 brushes. Going to have 1 brush, which I will only use for clean water. Oh, be sure to not do what I'm doing. Don't touch your painting to see if it's dry, because you might ruin it. So instead, just tilt your head to the side to see if there's still water. That's the safe way to do it. Don't do what I did. Wet your water brush. And I did mess up here quite a bit, and I could have edited this out. But I chose not to. I want you to see that everyone makes mistakes in art, because art is hard. As you can see right there, the color is bleeding outward. That's a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. What I meant to do was lay down a line of clean water, lay down the color, and then blend them together. But I laid down the water line too close to the color line. I'm going to go ahead and try to correct that as best I can by just blending it outward with the clean water brush. And in order to get the gradient effect, I do have a little fixer technique. I'm going to add a bit more color to the bottom to try to sharpen that line. I'm going to dry off my water brush and just with pressure pull off the pooled water on the top, and by doing so it does remove some of the pigment, and that helps create the gradient effect. Not the way I meant it, but it kind of worked. Now I did mess this up twice, so you're going to see me mess it up in a slightly different way now. We've zoomed in to precisely potato quality. My apologies. I am recording this with my phone. That's all I've got to work with. Same deal, go ahead and lay down a line of color, and this can be quite wet. Allow it to pool just a little bit because it will not stay there for very long. If you do let the color pool without blending it outward, it will create a bit of a stain, a stained-like appearance, and that is primarily only on hot press paper like I'm using. If you use cold press, it'll just be absorbed, but cold press is more expensive, so that's why I use this. I did mess up this technique here as well. I did not lay down the line of water, I just did the pulling, which is why this is not quite as smooth. You can still see that color line very clearly. So I'm using the tip of my brush to just sort of scrub it outward. And because the page is still quite wet, it is just diffusing outward there. Lay down some clean water and then push the color into that line of clean water. And then just blend it out. Use a dry brush to clean up the edges. And think, whoop, okay, nope, wait, think, okay, nope, and come back. All right, ooh, how exciting, we're speeding up. Now it's fast. Okay, we're gonna lay down our line of color, very wet, and this time around I did it correctly. See how I laid down the water separately and then pulled the color into it? That's the idea, and as you can see, it's such a smooth gradient. You can't see any sharp lines of where it starts to blend outward, only on the outside. I am using the dark color to paint the back of the computer, the base of the computer. And I'm doing that because in cubist paintings, you can have multiple light sources painted as if they were one, by which I mean that the shadows don't have to make sense. Just sit there and think for a bit. Continue thinking. Okay. In my first time around of narration, my first 2 times I messed up and said Dadaist when I meant cubist, but I didn't mess up this time. But I also can't be bothered to go back and fix the video. Same deal, repeat the process, lay down a line of very wet color, lay down a U shape of clean water, pull the color into the clean water, blend outward. You guys are probably very smart and can remember that simple set of steps, so instead of repeating it every single time, I'll just stop talking for a bit now. Now it's time for a new part of the painting and a new camera angle. Very exciting stuff. I'm using a very wet brush here, loaded with color. I'm using my round watercolor brush to fill in Coraline's dad's crumpled cup. I made sure that the perspective does not make sense, the way that the round top of the cup is exposed. That's not how things look, and that's the point of cubism. Now it's time to go back into our liner brush, and you're going to be able to see the technique very clearly here. I'm going to lay down a U shape of color, very wet, lay that down. I'm going to go back in with the clean water brush, look at my giant hands, and I'm going to make a U shape of clean water not quite touching the color. Make sure there's enough water, and then go in, scrub the color line into that water, and that's how we get that very smooth diffused appearance. Go ahead and repeat that, going all the way down. Look at my giant hands. Look at them. Huge. I look like an Amazonian warrior princess. Except not athletic. Or glamorous. Or with superhero powers. I guess unlike an Amazonian warrior princess in most ways. Giant hands. The shadows on the cup. What it is, I took the blue color from before and just added just a touch of black to it, just a tiny bit. If you add a little bit too much, it will overpower the color and you'll just have black. So be very cautious, add a teensy bit at a time of the black to create your shadow color. I'm putting it in a semicircle shape, then following up with the line of clean water, and then scrubbing downward. You can see the technique quite clearly there. It took a bit of thinking to decide where I wanted my shadows in the cup, because again, in cubism, these shadows are allowed to be nonsensical. So I decided that it should be the shadow on the top of the curve of the cup, then on the indent, just because I think that looked more interesting on the crumpled side, and then I added just a little bit, just a tiny bit on the outer edge, not because I felt it was necessary, but just because I wanted to be inclusive. I wanted to make sure that that outer edge felt noticed and loved, and we all deserve to feel noticed and loved. So I gave just a little darker color on the outside as well. Giant hand, and here you can see once more the technique very clearly. I laid down the color, I laid down the water, I pulled the color into the water. And that's really the biggest technique to take home from this lesson. That's a really great way to get a gradient for a wet on dry technique. Now it's time for a new camera angle. I'm going to fill the round watercolor brush with a dark green color, mixed in with a bit of brown, and I did not mix it thoroughly. I did that on purpose. And the reason for doing that is that it will dry unevenly with the colors a little bit splotchy, and I thought that looked more interesting than a flat color. And that's part of what I think is my way of doing cubism, because cubist colors tend to be very crisp and very flat, with the exception of that Marcel Duchamp painting I showed you at the end. So I really liked that approach, that uneven color approach. I just think it gives you more to look at, more to think about. Go ahead and use a liner brush to get those crisp outside edges. And if you look in the middle of his shirt, you can see those brown areas. That's what I mean about having not mixed the color evenly. That will be the result. Now it's time for yet another camera angle. I'm gonna lay down, well, I guess it was a return to the first camera angle, wasn't it? Lay down that darker color. So to create that darker color, I added a little bit more of the dark brown and then just a tiny bit of black, just a touch. And once more, it's the same technique. I did mess up again in this section, which you will see shortly. The first goof was right here. The color did start to bleed outward a bit, going below the line of the arm. You can see it happening just, yep, there it is. I'm working on it. And I did make it worse, not on purpose, of course. Right now I'm using that fine brush just to make sure I get that dark color in these little spaces. I nearly forgot to do his torso shadow. Who is he? Is he named Dave? I think I guessed Dave already. How about Wilson? His name probably wasn't Wilson. Tell you what, it probably wasn't James, because then he would be named Jim Jones, and I don't think they did that. going to come back in with the dark color, and here is where I messed up. So I'm trying to lay down the shadow color for his shoulder, and it just got kind of messy. So at some point I couldn't really recover it. So what I decided to do was to give up and take a little bit of paper towel, blot it out, and now it looks acceptable. You know, not great. Gonna go ahead and do the other arm now. Do that nice crisp line for the shadow. You get the idea. I do add a little bit more color in the elbow to create more attention to that spot. I want the eye to be drawn to the elbow. Now we're going to be adding the coloring for his skin. For the skin tone, I did a light brown color, added a touch of black to it, and then watered it down very, very far until now, as you can see, it's a very translucent color, and it gives him a very grayed out skin tone, very pale, somewhat sickly looking, generally unappealing, and to me that's how he looks in the movie. He, whoever he is, Willie Scott. Maybe he's named Scott. Great Scott, he might be named Scott. I apologize for that. Be sure to be very, very crisp around the eyes. Around the hairline, it's okay if you're a little messier because his hair is a darker color. But around the eyes, be careful to preserve that white space. Some watercolor artists also use gouache in addition to their watercolor, and in that case you can use white paint, but I don't. I just use plain watercolor, so there is no white watercolor. Here we have returned to our toaster quality, zoomed in. Now I took a very light pink and then watered it down very far so you can see it is translucent. I'm staying very carefully within the lines, which as a life principle I don't endorse, but in this exact situation, you should stay inside the lines. For his pink nose, I'm going to go into the clean water, going outside to in. That way, when I just barely touch the color, as you can see, it is a silky smooth transition. There will be no line at all. I'm just moving around the color a little bit so it doesn't pool, blending it some more. And I'm generally quite satisfied with how his nose turned out. How his nose turned out. Okay, new camera angle, but much higher quality. I'm not sure what I did differently here, but it does look a lot crisper. Go ahead and touch the painting, nearly ruining it once more. As you can see, my incredibly hairy arm is blocking everything. So for the moment, just take a pause to, oh, okay, never mind. There we go. Now you can see it. I'm glad I eventually thought that through. I am filling in his lenses with a light blue, again with a little bit of black added to it, and that's a great way to give a gray wash to your colors, is to add a touch of black, then to really water it down. Yet another camera angle here. What I'm doing is on one or two sides of his triangular hair bits, I am adding a darker brown. And the idea here is that I'm going to let it mostly dry. I'm going to go through all of them. And then I'm going to come back with the clean water brush and scrub out those dark lines until it creates a very subtle shadow effect. This technique I do where I lay down a line of color and then, okay, my camera is moving and I don't know why, because it's on a tripod and I didn't touch it. But see how it's jittering and swaying? If anyone knows how or why that's happening, please tell me, because the only conclusion I can come to is that there's a ghost in my house who is very slightly messing with me. I prefer that to a scary ghost, of course, but, you know, it'd be good to know why this is happening. Nearly done with adding the color on 1 to 2 lines. And I try to make it, generally speaking, on the right side of the triangles. just generally, because that's my idea of the light source, is that it's coming from the left. Now with clean water and pressure, and not that brush. Yeah, we're coming back with a new brush. Nearly there. Okay, now with this brush that has firmer bristles, I'm going to push into the paper so that I can scrub that dark color outward into the triangle. As you can see there, I'm using clean water to do that. No color right now. And you can see the result is that on the outside edge of the triangles, there is that nice dark color, but on the inside, it just diffuses inward. And it does look kind of messy right now, and that's because it is, but it won't look so bad after I do the outlining with the pens, so just be patient. I can't think of any other way to describe this other than scrubbing. Maybe gentle stabbing? Yeah. There you go. Gently stab your painting. Lovingly stab. Okay, zooming in yet closer, which wasn't necessary, but now you can see real close what I'm doing. This is sped up, I should say. I'm not capable of moving that quickly. That would be really cool, but I am not a movie from the 19-teens. I cannot move that fast. Are you a movie from the 19-teens? Can you move this fast? Are you Dash from The Incredibles? Leave me a comment. I'd like to know. Nearly done with the scrubbing. I don't know what my technique is called. Laying down color, laying down water, blending the color into the water. I don't know if that has a name. I just sort of figured that out on my own. Mostly through error. I mean trial and error, but it was mostly error. Now it's time to do the outlining, which I think is very satisfying to watch. It was certainly satisfying to do. Now it is time to, okay, nearly cover up. Don't actually cover it up. There we go. Smooth line with the bold pen. And I'm covering it up. You can't see what I'm... Oh, okay, now you can see that one. Oh, good. Okay, move my hands. I thought I'd block the whole thing. I'm doing the outside of each triangle first because it does take a moment for the pen to dry and I don't want to smear it. So rather than doing all sides of the triangle, I'm doing the outsides first, then the tops, then the inside. There you go. See? Clean that up. And it just went around to every single line that I drew, repeating this process. Now's a good time to say thank you for watching to the end, or you're welcome for helping you fall asleep. I did make a sticker out of this painting if you are interested. There's a link in the description to where you can get one if you want that. I'd love to know what you think of these. I am still starting out. I need tips, so go ahead and leave me any feedback. And it's time for the reveal. Here we go, panning upward. It's looking pretty good. Certainly better than the last painting. All right, and it, oh gosh, it's not done. Forgot to fill in his eyebrows and his eyeballs. Okay, take two. Filling in the brow 1. Filling in brow 2. Boy, that's nice to watch. Filling in eyeball 1. Filling in eyeball 2. There we go. Now there's our original reference meme. Okay. And there's my painting, a cubist interpretation. I had one last line to do after I took the tape off, and it was only at this point that I realized I had painted a pentagon computer screen rather than a square. So, well, can't fix it now. I kind of like it. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody.